Started. I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to be here tonight, and for all of you folks that have sent us suggestions, comments, questions. We really appreciate it. I'd also like to thank our communications committee, our maintenance committee, our finance committee, and all of our staff and all my fellow directors for all the work that it's taken to get these town halls and the budget all put up and responded to and kind of put into the format that we're seeing tonight. We're not going to change the format particularly from last time, except that what we have currently is of an integrated response from to really respond to all the questions that have come in and all the comments. So we're going to be addressing, and hopefully there'll be a lot more as we go through. So just so that we're really clear, the purpose of these two town halls has really been to create an understanding what the budget priorities and what the budget priorities are, and really what our main initiatives and focus is going to be for the year, so that as our budget comes out, there's really no surprises. We're going to walk through kind of the top line of all of the budget items, so that there's a sense of what's in the budget. So by the time we get to our annual general meeting and that package comes out to you, there's not going to be a lot of surprises there. Let's see, there's really four key areas that we're focusing on: maintenance, our administration and our office team, revenues, and our reserves. So those are the four kind of topics that we've broken everything into. We saw that last time. We're going to just walk through that again. There's not a lot of change in the numbers, but there is some discussion that we'll probably have that'll be a little different and reflective of those questions that have come in. So as I said before, our focus since May has really been getting back to basics, really focusing on a couple just real critical areas. We're going to simplify our focus on our core SRA functions, which is maintenance, ASC, bookkeeping, community communications. We want to just make sure that that stuff is streamlined and moving and responsive. We want to inspire community involvement, because we realize that there is a lot of experience and a lot of talent that sits in our community that I'm sure would like to be more involved, and we'd like to figure out how to make those people feel comfortable and have channels for that involvement. We want to streamline the committee involvement as well, so that it becomes a little bit more rewarding, a little bit more fun. And the whole point is that we really need the talent that's sitting out in the community, and we really want you to feel that we're open to receiving that. The other things that we're going to be doing is evolving our staffing and skill proficiencies. We feel that there's a lot of efficiency and cost-effective steps that we're going to take in the coming months. We want to, at the heart of that, really develop a service mindset and focus on details. I don't want to walk out my gate again and see our guys that have just watered there, but there's a whole line of weeds standing in front of them. So I just, that whole mindset about detail, attention to detail and service is something I think we really want to start to see develop, and we're going to do as much as we can to get that developed in our staff. And then the last real overarching strategy is to really fortify our reserves. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to John Palin. John is chairman of our maintenance committee. The maintenance committee's done a great job working with Bruce and Debbie in our finance team to get to what we think is a really good picture for where we're going with maintenance this year. So, John?
Thank you, Doug. I think I'm unmuted here. I want to reiterate Doug's thanks to members of the maintenance committee. I see their names are showing on the screen as in the little notes section there. So they have been a real source of good information and strategy going forward. And that strategy, just to start out with, is to reduce the level of staffing and increase the level of outsourcing. Now, this doesn't mean we're going to a full outsourcing model or anything like that, not even close to it, but we will be doing some outsourcing based on the recommendation of the maintenance committee going forward. Next slide, please. Thank you. And the rationale for moving to a little bit higher level of outsourcing is to improve the consistency of services, and in some areas, especially targeting professional expertise. And in doing this, we can reduce some of the staffing challenges that are currently very broad in the entire workforce across the country. It's very challenging to recruit and train qualified staff in most areas across the country. And by moving in the direction of outsourcing, we can reduce some level of spending and repairs. For example, just on maintenance of vehicles and equipment and fuel, we spend about $35,000 a year on that activity. So this outsourcing test, if you want to call it that, there's no plans to get rid of any tools or equipment. So that's, if this strategy doesn't work going forward, it will be relatively straightforward to do the hiring that we're choosing not to do at the moment and kind of pick up where we left off. Next slide, please. So the level of staffing, the maintenance committee recommends that it's 2.6 full-time equivalents. That includes the leader of the maintenance group, plus one more permanent full-time position, one full-time temporary employee for 5 months, May through September, focused on seasonal watering needs, and then a part-time employee who is currently operating, maintaining, and repairing the street sweeper. We are very fortunate to have Leroy on the staff doing that effort. And the maintenance committee recommends that we continue with this strategy until it's no longer viable strategy. And through all of this, the effort is to align staffing with the actual work tasks that need to be completed. Next, please. So in terms of significant projects that are recommended for outsourcing, the number one item would be accelerated replacement of the aging entrance signs. There are at least 10 that are in really poor condition, where both posts holding the sign are in very poor condition. They're pretty much rotted. And with the remaining signs that are not in this first accelerated push, those will be replaced over the next 5 years. Entrance gates are another activity where there's been a tremendous amount of deferred maintenance. Some gates are over 30 years old, well beyond their useful functional life, and we're limping along trying to keep them going. So the plan is, as recommended, would be to replace about 4 gates per year over the next 5 years. And that includes primarily the operator, which is the mechanism which slides the gates open and close, as well as the safety fencing that protects people who might be walking around the gate when the gate moves. Another significant outsourced project would be landscape maintenance, which would include gates, islands, and parks, and also stormwater bioswales, repair and preventive maintenance of those assets, which haven't been given a lot of attention in recent times, and they are showing their age and wear. From a cost standpoint, you can see on this slide the differences between the forecast for 2021 with the months remaining and the forecast for 2022. You can see that the personnel cost is going down somewhat, but it would be down significantly more than that if it weren't for the vacant positions, which have not been filled for most of the calendar year, I believe. So that reduction in staffing cost is much greater than it appears to be here. Outsourcing of maintenance and repairs, all costs, not just outsourcing, but the committee recommends we increase the budget from 110,000 estimated this year to 170,000 next year. And a good chunk of that is landscape maintenance. And the other items which fall under the maintenance budget that aren't especially maintenance related, but that's the bucket that they're held in, will go up slightly. So when you look at the percent of total budget in 2021, the forecast is that these maintenance items are about 38% of the total budget. In the next fiscal year, 2022, it will be closer to 45% of the budget. So this reflects an increased focus and spending on maintenance. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Doug. Or Joe.
Hi, it's Joe Sothey, the treasurer, and welcome all of you, and thank you for coming out. I see at this moment in time we're almost at 70 participants, which means not including staff and the board, it's in excess of 50, which is great. Just to let you guys know, and I know a number of you are probably repeat attenders, at the last meeting there was also about the same number in the total of about 60. So that's great. And what we're trying to do is let you know about a little bit of what we've done, but more so on what we're planning to do that's a little bit different next year than this year and perhaps in past years when most of us were not on the board. So we're going to focus on efficiency for the administrative area of our business. We're going to identify projects and tasks that can be better, have better efficiencies brought forward. We're going to prioritize projects and tasks throughout the year and continually revisit them. If you identify things at the beginning of the year, they don't stay there all year. You determine what's most important to do this month, this week, next month, and then you do them and make sure they get finished as long as they're in the high level of priority. Consolidated banking, one of the things that has happened in the past few months, in fact, just since April, I believe, we have gone to more or less just one bank. Prior to this, we had, I believe, 4 different banks, and we had approximately 12 or 14 different accounts that were active at periods of time. What that meant is that we were continually having money move from one account to another account, from one bank to another bank, if the balances were needing to be replenished, because certain tasks were happening in certain bank accounts. We're also going to focus on revenue collecting and expense payments online. Many of you have been making your payments either through auto debits or through your bank portals. We intend to do the same thing, including collecting money from you, our valued residents in the community. One thing that you don't know probably is when each of you writes a check, and right now about half of the community does auto debit and about half of the community provides checks to the association. For each person that gives a check, we have always made a photocopy of that check, had to go directly to the ledger, make sure, record the check number, where it came from, and then go to the banks in order to deposit them. When you look at the world that we live in these days, the amount of time doing that is very inefficient when perhaps the personnel use could be used on productive administration tasks. We are going to target specific external professional expertise, which will not be for administration types of items or organizing our community or whatever. It'll be for professionals like lawyers or human resource personnel or tax professionals, if there's anything that we need to do specifically for tax, etc. It will not be very much, and it will, when I show you the financials compared to 2021, you'll see that what we're spending or proposed to spend in 2022 is considerably less. IT upgrades. Thanks actually to the staff and to a couple of directors, including John, who just chatted with you. In the past month or two, we embarked on some significant IT upgrades so that the staff can communicate better and there is better security amongst all of our records that we keep in-house. Some of those records that are currently kept in-house that we want to move out of house are for those who do auto debits, they're actually kept internally with the bank routing number and account number where you pay your dues and or other items that you pay to the community. Next slide, please. So for administration, what you're seeing is that personnel costs are going to be relatively the same. We've currently got 3 full-time people and we've got 1 part-time person who works somewhere around 25 hours or so a week. The only change that's being proposed is perhaps moving that part-time person to a full-time position if there is a need for that to occur. Professional fees, I mentioned that a minute ago. The bulk of the professional fees in 2021 to the tune of just over $100,000 were for the prior joint partner consultants that many of you know about. Those fees terminated at the end of March, and we have not used them and do not intend to use them at all going forward. Any of the professional fees going forward are for legal, HR, accounting, and similar types of tasks that are necessary for any organization. And the other costs, which are just the office costs of keeping the office open, are under other, and they're similar to 2021. Next slide, please. So for the overall operations, what we're looking at in 2021, and this was published, these numbers were published at the last board meeting and is available on the website. The personnel is just over 50% of our total costs, and all the other costs are just aggregated between maintenance and administration, and about $50,000 in total related to the building, which is mostly attributed to the mortgage costs. In 2022, personnel costs are going to be relatively the same, a little bit more in admin, a bit less and in maintenance. John already went over the repairs and maintenance line item. I already went over the professional fees line item, and the other costs are going to stay relatively the same. In aggregate, what we're looking at is approximately a $45,000 or so dollar decrease from year to year. Next slide, please. The reserve fund. And so most of the time, people don't pay attention to the reserve fund. In fact, we as a board only pay small attention to it on a regular basis. That's because it's a very discrete number of items with a specific amount associated with it. And generally, these items are capitalized. In 2021, the amount associated with the reserve fund in the plan was higher than what it's forecasting right now. And other than the 2 bioswale amounts down below in the 2021 column, totaling a potential estimate of $150,000. And I must caution that the amounts could be substantially less than that. We don't know what the amounts are because they're currently undergoing a revision or a review of what the quality of the bioswales are compared to what they should be. Many of you have heard noise in the recent past about the Carnoustie bioswale. We're in the process of looking at the Drayton Hillside bioswales, of which there's 2 of them. We don't believe it's going to be anywhere near $75,000, but I put that number down as a number that could be a risk if they're in bad quality like the Carnoustie bioswale looks like it could be. In 2022, as long as we take care of the bioswales, there will be nothing to do with them. And to what John was saying a minute ago, the main costs are going to be for gate operators and the entry sign improvements. Very little else is going to be spent during the year from what we can see at this time as a plan. Next slide, please. So just as an FYI, for 2021, the year we're in right now, this is how the revenue bucket breaks down. We've got about $802,000 in total from the HOA dues for the operating fund. That is not for the reserve fund. That comprises in 2021 about 85% of all revenues that we obtain. We have another $56,000 from ASC review fees for new homes and or fines if people have not been doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they're usually in building or they're removing trees or whatever. One thing that is not recurring that we received was the forgiven COVID payroll protection plan loan. It was forgiven by the government, I believe it was in April. So we got given the money last year. It's treated as a liability because it was to fund us, but this year it was forgiven. And once again, that is not recurring, so that amount will not be ever obtained again. Frankly, we hope, because we don't ever want to be in the situation that we were in. Just letting you know that at the AGM last year, there was a transfer fee petition that largely got blocked. And that was, I believe, 0.5% of the value of the property in addition to $250. So the $250 amount stayed. And if you look at it, the $28,000 equates to approximately 110 sold properties is being estimated in 2021, of which we're receiving $28,000 towards the administration side of doing the transfers, and then just other income. Next slide, please. So the annual dues. So this year's annual dues, and I know many of you just paid them, worked out to $270 per unit that you own. A lot is 2 units, a lot with a home is 4 units, and condos or others are somewhere in the vicinity between 2 and 4 units. In 2020, $245 of that $270 per unit, or 91%, has gone to the operating fund in 2021, which is the same as 2020, and $25 per unit was attributed to the reserve fund, which also is the same. However, we are running and have been all year a combined deficit in 2021. So in 2022, I presented to you the expenses for 2022. If we are going to break even, we would need and I'm not suggesting we should break even or we should make money or lose money in either of the funds, but if we were to break even for the operations fund, we would need a dues increase of about 3 to 5%, which is equal to about $8 to $11 per unit that you own. For the reserve fund, we would need, of which we raised about 80,000 this year. If we're going to raise to about 125 or 130,000, I just presented on the last slide, we would need an increase of about 60%, but 60% only equates to $15 a unit. So the overall combined is looking like it's going to be somewhere in the range of about 9%, or approximately $100 per year for a single family home. Next slide, please. I believe that this is over to Doug, and thank you very much. Doug, are you there?
Sorry about that. I forgot that I had muted myself. Next steps after tonight, we'll expect there'll be some more comments tonight during this program, and then probably some follow-up. We're going to review all of those, and the budget will be adjusted to reflect what we think it needs to be changed by. And then on Thursday next week, the budget will go to the board for adoption, and then that adopted budget will go into the AGM package that will go out to you all, which you will then vote on for ratification. So those are the follow-up steps to get to a final budget. So I just want to, just as a final comment, community involvement and constructive input is really essential for us in maintaining a cohesive, fully functioning community. We hope and believe these town halls have provided you all some critical information, certainly has provided us with some good feedback. I think that it creates for a better understanding with among the residents, directors, and staff. So I hope that as we move forward, we'll always feel that these town halls are just great venues for sharing ideas. Also, coffee at the club or down at the hotel and those kinds of things with all of us anytime is really a good way as well. So with that, we're going to open up the lines now for communication, discussion, questions, and don't hold anything back. And we're going to be as open, transparent, and communicative as possible. So, Lori, you want to walk us through the folks that have signed up to talk?
Okay, did you want to start with the 3 anonymous questions?
Yeah, that would be fine to start with those. Do you want to just ask them?
Okay, so somebody submitted these and they wanted to remain anonymous. We recognize the budget is very important and it is necessary to spend considerable time on that, but we also believe replacing Debbie Smith may turn out to be very difficult, and we hope the search has already commenced. When a suitable candidate is located, can they be seen on a Zoom meeting and questioned by residents before the candidate is confirmed?
Okay, we shared these comments today amongst our fellow board members. And so as it relates to a replacement for our executive director, that will not be a public process. That will be done by the board. Your board that's one of the functions that a board typically will undertake. There's really a sense of urgency to fill this, and if we open this to a wide open public, it's going to increase the time frame that it's going to take to actually get that person on board and initiated and trained up to speed. And so there will be discussions, there will be interviews. Most likely one of those interviews will be at a board meeting, which will be open where people can listen to those interviews. But for the most part, we feel that this is going to be a very time sensitive process. We know that everybody in the community probably has varying ideas as to who those or what those skills that person should have, what kind of experience they should have. Your board is well versed in the processes of hiring. We've talked in depth about what we want and what we think the community needs. And so we're going to move quickly towards that. Currently, we've got a recruiter that is working on behalf of the SRA that is already receiving resumes and is doing background checks and verifying the data that's on those resumes, so that when she makes a recommendation to us, we'll have a good sense that a lot of the background and a lot of the references have been checked, and that what we see is really what we're getting. Next question.
Okay, I was told I was too quiet, so I'm going to try to be a little bit louder here. Second question that was asked anonymously is that COVID has started to infect Semiahmoo residents. Can the SRA board express the opinion that they hope all residents will choose to be vaccinated?
This is a question that's come up a couple of times. The board nor the SRA staff are really have the appropriate knowledge or expertise to provide recommendations on healthcare issues or other non-SRA related topics. It's outside the scope of the SRA and management and government. And for that reason, we just think that it's, there's plenty that's been stated. It's been repeated a lot in the media. All of our SRA staff are fully vaccinated. So I think the board would like to leave it at that. Next question.
For 20 years, we have been concerned about maintenance within our gates and frequently have tried to help. We recently hired a company to work on our entrances, and the new plants were a big improvement. However, the lack of water has caused some of them to die. If we do not have water at our gates, can water be piped in to save the need for a truck to be driven around with a large tank to keep the plants watered? What would this cost?
We have had a lot of discussion about this, and most of our gates have water that's metered water right on the inside of the gate that would be cost effective to extend. We haven't actually looked into getting fixed cost for those extensions or what it would really entail, but that will probably be something we're going to really look into in this coming year. Now, the islands are really a different story. The islands all have, or for the most part, have water lines under them, but it's quite expensive to deal with the city in getting a meter installed and then building an irrigation system in those islands. So the islands are going to be probably a bigger question. The thing I think we really want to try and accomplish, if possible, and like I said, we haven't done any in-depth research or really any costing of it, but what we really want to do is look into seeing if we can get the entrance gates where we have water on the inside of the gate that's easy to extend, see how much it's going to cost and see if we can't get that done. So I think that one of the things that we want to do, and I think it's been possibly done in the past that we're going to try and follow up with, is just a long-term cost-benefit analysis of what it takes to do that. It costs us probably right now about $20,000 a year for plus the cost of the equipment and gas and the water to water currently. So that's a pretty big number that can be amortized over a number of years. So it's really one of those things we're going to look into, and it's worth looking into. It's a great question.
Okay, so first person on the list is Ted Metz.
Hi there, Lori. This is Ted Metz. I live in Stonehaven, and as a prior disclaimer I made, I was on the board for 4 years and I was chair of the maintenance for 3.5 years. I'm really concerned about the maintenance committee and the board seemingly paying us lip service about doing things. It's so frustrating You have a director of maintenance who's probably paid a good amount of money. You have 1.5 staff members that are paid obviously much lower. You have no conception of how to get things done in the community. You're going to outsourcing and you're going to try it as an experiment. So why hasn't the community been forwarded all the costs for that? What is the analysis that leads you to say that you in fact found it cost effective to do it? I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen anything posted. I haven't read it anywhere of anything posted. You talk about job descriptions and that you're having a recruiter, you're having people look at this thing. Your past record on recruiting people is just terrible. You arbitrarily hired consultants. I wonder what kind of background check you did thoroughly on the director of maintenance. And I'm sorry if I'm singling him out, but someone should go out to Sudden Valley and find out what the real story is there. You talk about staffing challenges. You look at the maintenance. I don't see anything about Drayton Hillside. If you go down the old Drayton Harbor Road, quite regularly when we get rains, that hillside moves. And we've had 3 instances of major slides there. And so I don't see that built in. I again asked last time on the meeting, where is the budget for continuing paving maintenance? I don't see any budget there this year. You show it as 0. And it's just frustrating because you say nice things, but you don't follow through. You arbitrarily make the decisions in the board. We didn't have these issues in the past, and I've heard numerous references, and I take offense to them, quite frankly, that we weren't doing our job. As I mentioned last time, I drove the community with Lori at least twice a year, and usually 3 of us went, and we looked at all the properties. We looked at all the issues. We looked at the paving that had to be done on the roads. We looked at gate maintenance, and I know what the gate maintenance is. I know what was done and what wasn't done. And today, I drove out of the gate. I had to, luckily I know how to open the gate when it's not opening, and open it. It's parked open. Does anybody drive around and look at these gates? Does your director of maintenance, who's paid probably a pretty good salary, drive around to the gates every day and take a look and see what's going on? No. So it's frustrating. And I really believe that you are just paying us lip service. You have 2 full-time employees, and one is the director of maintenance. What do we need a director of maintenance for? Why don't we just have a maintenance foreman, if that's all he's going to supervise, and be a working maintenance person in addition to the one we have? So I'm sorry, but I just find that the maintenance committee and the board are being derelict in their duty at this point to provide good maintenance support to the community. I don't think you're doing it, and you're looking at expensive trial or outsourcing, and I just think it's ludicrous that we have no costs. Thank you.
I'll just respond to a couple things, Ted, in that this board did not have any involvement with hiring the joint partners, the consultants. We have not hired any person since this board took office. So those are probably the first 2 things that come to mind. The second thing that comes to my mind, Ted, and I've mentioned to you, I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to get together and talk to you over a cup of coffee or something. But the things that we're doing, I don't know how you can say that there's not work being done, because now I will say that it's not as efficient as it needs to be, and that's what we're really focusing on. But there's some underpinnings that need to be fixed for as we move through this that have been neglected over the years. And so as we move forward, we're going to really be focusing this coming year on fixing some of that deferred maintenance. And a good example of this is landscaping. Landscaping is one of the things that we should be outsourcing, because landscaping is at the low end of our pay scale. It is where we've had just a tremendous amount of turnover. And I think you know that, Ted, that we've had turnover for a long time in our maintenance teams.
Yeah.
And what we can do is outsource that to folks that know landscaping, that understand how to put programs in place so that our landscaping will be tended to and taken care of the way it needs to be tended to. We can then take that smaller staff and really focus on the stuff that needs to be dealt with. Our signs need to be upgraded. We need maintenance plans in place to prevent them from falling apart. There's a whole litany of things that we're working on, and I think that if you look closely around, you'll start to see that those things are being put in place. But there's a lot of work to be done. And
Doug, just 1 second. You mentioned the signs, and you've talked about this numerous times. So maybe the previous board forced Justin out of his maintenance position, or made it so impossible for him to do his job that he left and moved down to Oregon. But the reason we bought that tractor, one of the major reasons we bought that tractor, was to simplify and expedite the removal of the signs that were bad and placed and do it. Now, the maintenance department at that time was hamstrung a little bit by lack of budget. You know, everybody wants to not pay anymore. Everybody wants the same rates they had 5 years ago. Well, we all know that's impossible. But nonetheless, this equipment was there, and we had a working manager and forced people. We hired them, they stayed, but you're going to have a tractor do nothing. You've got a sweeper, thank God you kept. Who's going to do the snow clearing? I don't see anything in the budget for snow clearing. Is your director of maintenance, is he going to be driving around doing snow clearing? There's too many unanswered questions. And when I look at the budget, your wages have gone up for maintenance, but I don't see any more work being done. So what do we need a maintenance department for if that's what's going to happen? You're really baffling me, quite frankly, and it's very frustrating to see 4 years of what I worked on with other talented, capable people, and then to hear that we're not doing the job. It was maintenance wasn't done, or this wasn't done. Well, I have to tell you that the previous board is the reason that so much wasn't done. Thank you.
Laurie, next question.
That would be Buzz Abercrombie.
Is he unmuted?
Thank you. I just did. I hope. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay. I just had to get up and take care of that. I want to go back to a slide that I think Joe showed that got me confused. It's the one that deals with the reserves. The first question is, can I assume that we're talking restricted reserves here? Because if we are, now I'm really confused. Number one, how realistic is it that we're going to actually spend $150,000 between now and December 31st on doing something with bioswales? Second, I don't recall seeing an approved item in the restricted reserve AGM package last year for Drayton Hillside bioswales anywhere near 75. And I know that there was none for the Carnoustie bioswale. If that comes out of restricted reserves, How can we do that legally? Because if that hasn't been approved by the membership, it cannot be spent out of restricted reserves in 2021.
Joe, do you want to respond to that, please?
So Buzz, to answer your question, those are estimated risks that might need to be spent. My understanding of how a reserve works is that anything that is related to infrastructure, of which bioswales clearly are related to infrastructure and or capitalized, and these are amounts that are significant in nature, should be coming out of budgeted in and or coming out of the reserves. To your point about whether they were in the reserve for the plan for 2021, they absolutely were not.
Joe, I think I would strongly suggest that you check state law, because it is very strict that if it wasn't approved by the membership, it cannot be spent out of restricted reserves. And second, how realistic is it that between now and the end of this year, anybody could spend $150,000 sensibly on bioswales? Unless the project is well along and has already been let with the contractor, there's no practical way that that's going to get finished between now and the end of the year.
Hey, Buzz, I will just make one comment about the Carnoustie bioswale. And the Carnoustie bioswale will not be an SRA expense. Now, it might, from a cash perspective, be this year, but reimbursed next year. That could possibly happen depending on what happens with the negotiation on the agreement that was cast last year or earlier this year with the New Ventures and Semiahmoo LLC. We're in the middle of working on that negotiation, along with trying to identify specifically where the repair is. And what we're being told by engineers is that it's not really a repair, it really has to be a rebuild, because the Semiahmoo LLC, which was the lender for the developer who took it back in deed in lieu of foreclosure, never maintained that bioswale. And so as a result, trees have grown in it. And we believe that one of the reasons that it's failed its test is because the roots have penetrated the seal at the bottom. And who knows how many times that has occurred through that. So we're still in the process of trying to get to the bottom of what we're actually going to be responsible for. But the fact of the matter is, any way you look at it, it's really not an SRA expense. It is a Carnoustie Homeowners Association expense. And really, it should be the declarant's expense, but that's still in negotiation.
Doug, I applaud that, but then why is it on here?
Joe, is it on the budget because it's a potential cash item this year that we may have to go out of pocket and then get reimbursed for?
It is in the budget because there is a risk that the SRA will need to be on the hook for it based on what we have heard from a preliminary view of two different lawyers.
Well, I clearly am not a lawyer, and I'm not going to get involved in that part of it, although it confuses me even more. But I do come back, and I hate to repeat myself, you can't take that out of restricted reserves unless it was approved by the membership in the AGM. And regardless of whether we are on the hook for it or not, it's not going to get spent in 2021. It's going to, if we're liable for that, it's going to be spent in 2022.
Buzz, you're making an assumption that you have an idea of what's going on because you're involved, especially with the Carnoustie bioswale. If you've been involved, I certainly don't know about it. And I've been at board meetings for the past few months where this has been a topic of conversation.
Joe,
So relating to Carnoustie, We have had engineers already spend a whole bunch of time surveying. We have actually had cameras go down and identify the problems or potential problems. And I believe it's about 300 feet of problems. And we had an estimate about 2 months ago saying what it would cost to fix the whole or replace the whole Carnoustie bioswale. So for you to talk about the bioswale and state there's no way it's going to be spent might be a bit of an overstatement. You may be correct in Drayton Hillside.
The only 2 points that I'm trying to make is, number one, you can't spend that out of restricted reserve unless it is approved by the membership. Now, the second point is, whether we are on the hook, whether the amount is $75,000 or $75 million, I'm questioning the realistic, how realistic it is that that's going to get spent between now and the end of this year. Just a matter of time, not a matter of what needs to be done or whether I was involved or not. Just the fact that you have a large project that isn't let yet, isn't determined yet, but you still plan on spending it between now and the end of the year. How is that possible?
At the beginning of this slide, Buzz, I said that this is a risk that might need to be spent. The Carnoustie one is very realistic. The Drayton Hillside is unknown, but in any case, we have a desire to fix those bioswales if possible, and the contractors have said they would fix Carnoustie once we figured out how it was going to be paid. The Drayton Hillside is not as certain. But there's a desire to get this done before we hit the winter bad weather. Whether it gets done for sure, I don't know. But what I decided to do is put it down as a risk. I'm not so sure that you would think it's better to put down 0 and then we need to do it as we hit the end of the year, but nobody forecasts that.
Very well.
Lori, next person.
April Hashimoto.
Hi, thanks. I have 2 questions. One question is a question I asked at the last meeting and I didn't really get a very clear answer. And that was, how is the board or the management deciding what maintenance and repair activities are happening in 2021 and what activities are happening in 2022? Because there are these slides and photos of leaning over signs and picnic tables that are covered in moss, and I recall that that was first presented to all of us, or was presented at a board meeting in May. And yet there seems to be, instead of working on replacing or fixing some of the signs that are worse off, or addressing some of the repairs that need to be done on some of the gates, it seems like there's been a decision made that none of that will be addressed in 2021, and we can only start working on those things in 2022. So that was the question I asked at the last meeting, and I didn't really feel that I got a good answer to that. That's one question. I don't know if you want me to wait before I ask my second question. It's sort of a different topic.
Is Lori, is Bruce on the call tonight?
Yes, I am, Doug.
Would you please respond to April's question?
April, as far as what we are doing this year in the plan, as you know, we've been short-staffed. Up until the time that we brought Leroy aboard, we didn't have the skill sets, and that's very important to note, the skill sets to do the repairs that we really need to do. With Leroy coming aboard, we were able to get the street sweeper started. He spent up towards 80 hours getting that started up. From that point, I signed him over to the park, William Rex, another 80 or so hours there, and we had the sprinkler system working so that it wasn't just a dried out area. I now have him working on the gates replacing some of the literally worn out parts on it. They are now functioning where some of them were marginally operational. As far as the plan, it's kind of difficult to plan anything when you have really one full-time staff person maintaining the lawns, if you will, maintaining the trails, and that type of idea. Does that help explain? You just
Yeah, I mean,
don't have the staff.
I guess my overall question is why these items get pointed out to the membership all the time as these deficient items, and yet the work to repair them or to address them, you know, like these pictures of rotting posts and these pictures of rotting swing sets, and you know, the pictures keep going up, but the addressing them seems to specifically be put into 2022. And so that was my question, is how did we decide that they go into 2022?
I believe we put the plan together at the request of the maintenance committee for a 5-year plan of replacement. And at that point, it was decided to move into 2022.
Okay, my second question is sort of dovetailing off of what Ted was talking about. I have concerns about the budget, and I know, Doug, you and I exchanged some emails, and unfortunately I didn't read yours until too late, your reply. One of my concerns is that that we have a budget and then the budget gets blown. And the reason I'm concerned about that is because it seems that if the new maintenance budget includes outsourcing all the landscaping and outsourcing, well, whether it's outsourced or it's done in-house, it really doesn't matter. But if it includes outsourcing all the maintenance, outsourcing maintaining the bioswales, outsourcing a bunch of repair work on the signs, then to me, what needs to happen is we need to, and I assume the board's done this, needs to have an idea of what it costs to do, you know, plan A, which is that these things are done in-house and these things are outsourced, and plan B, which is that, you know, less is done in-house and more is outsourced, and that those costs are based on something like a quote, like a binding quote, because, you know, you don't want to get a quote for something that's like $32,000 or $25,000 and then have it turn into $100,000, right? You want to have a quote that is not, you know, you don't get shocked when the prices go up and you have to say, well, you know, we didn't anticipate the prices would go up, or we didn't anticipate it was going to be harder to get people than we thought. So my question is, when this maintenance budget for repairs went from 110 to 170, how were the costs determined for what it was going to cost to have external landscaping? And to what extent, to what level of confidence does the board have in those quoted amounts to know that it's not going to just go crazy next year, or that the people who quoted, who they got quotes from this year, declined to quote next year?
John, do you and Bruce want to kind of tag team that one?
Okay, let me get off mute if you give me a second here. I've got a problem on my end. It looks like I'm losing it.
We can hear you just fine, Bruce.
Okay. I'll try to address the quotes because most of the numbers came from me initially. As far as the landscaping, we had a company in here, of course, you know, did the entrances. I then asked for a quote to do the inside. Based on those numbers, I projected out what it would cost to maintain for a year the entrances and the interior. One of the things I did find out, though, most companies will not validate or retain their quote for more than 120 days at the max. They don't know what's going to happen. They don't know where things are going. So that's why I use my numbers as a projection. Does that help you, April?
Well, I guess the question is, how confident is the board in putting forward those numbers as part of the budget? And knowing that they're going to be able to work within that budget in 2022.
John?
John, can you reply to that? John, you may be muted.
Oh, okay, thank you. So the numbers came from Bruce, and they are the best numbers that we have with respect to landscape maintenance. It's not the maintenance committee's job to go out and get quotes and to run the maintenance department. We review plans and priorities, and we have to rely on staff to do their job. So what level of confidence do we have? I don't know how to quantify that, but as I look at the number for landscaping, it seems to be a pretty sizable number, and I have some level of confidence. I'm not certain, but some level of confidence that it will be enough. The risks of outsourcing landscape maintenance, I mean, you're correct. A company could raise prices, they could not perform, they could not do a good job, but the same risks, I believe, same level of risk that I think is even more difficult to manage comes along with the insourcing of those things. We had staff go leave at one level of wages and been unable to hire replacements even at 30% higher, and we can't get staff. So I believe the risk of having staff, either recruiting or retaining staff, is significantly higher than hiring a landscape company to do the job. In my own neighborhood, there's 44 homes, extensive large common areas. There's a bunch of shoreline, and it's handled for a similar amount of money. I believe the scope of work is larger. So I think it's a reasonable number. We don't have concrete quotes. We couldn't get them now to be effective in 2022. So, I believe it's on Bruce's list to get firm quotes in November.
Yes, you're right, John.
So, the worry is, and I'm sure you guys have the same worry, the worry is that a decision is made to outsource certain things, including the landscaping. January comes, or November, December, whenever, I don't know what the timing is. You either the costs come in much higher than you were expecting, or you're able to get a 1-year contract and then the people want a much higher amount, or they walk. And then we're sort of back at where we were. I'm happier, I guess, to hear that it's not a fait accompli. That it sounds like you're looking at it more as a test case. I don't know if that's true. That's what I heard. But that's the concern. I mean, I think if you've had a good experience with landscaping at Samuel Shore, that's kudos to you guys. There's just as many or more people who have churned through landscape companies and landscape providers because I haven't been happy with them. So my only concern is, if we've been running a deficit this year and next year we have either an increase or a balanced budget, and then those costs cannot be met, that we start running a deficit again. That's the only reason I'm asking. I mean, I am just asking if the board has considered all of those aspects, and are comfortable with that's the risk of that happening is very, very low because of the sort of tenuous position we're in, trying to kind of claw back from being in a deficit position. For 2 years, we were in a deficit position 2020 as well.
You raise really excellent points, April. I look at this decision as a trial period in the maintenance committee discussions. That's exactly what we said as well. Let's try it for a year and see how it goes. And I believe it's the least worst choice that we're facing right now.
Well, and I'll just add one thing, John, and I think that with the amount of money that's in the budget for outsourcing landscaping, we're going to see a huge improvement over what we've seen executed in the past 3 years that we've seen here. I think we're going to see a big improvement, and we'll make it work on that number. If it's not 100% of what we really want, we'll at least be 80%, which is going to be a big improvement from where we are. So
You can have the place look like Buckingham Palace if you have an endless budget, right?
correct.
So it really comes down to what you want to pay and what the options are out there.
This is John again. Just a couple of comments on this and one of the prior questions. After what I think everyone would agree, the joint partners trauma that we suffered from a budget standpoint, the new board was really focused on trying to control costs, and there were items approved. There was significant restricted reserve funding approved in the budget last year that was not spent this year. There was 105,000, I think, for road repairs, and honestly, our roads are not in bad shape. They need crack sealing to keep them going, but I don't believe there's any roads that are in horrible shape that need resurfacing. And one of the maintenance committee members has a lot of experience in this area, and that's their opinion as well. So back to your question, April, about spending in 2021 versus 2022, there has been a focus on trying not to spend things that we don't really have to spend to try and recover from the budget deficit as the budget was presented this year. The revised spending plan is not the budget per se. We're spending well under what the budget was by design. So I would just throw that out there.
Doug, if I could make one comment, I think we've really hashed this issue a lot, so it's probably good to move on. But April, I'd just like to say, I think this board is committed to financial transparency and fiscal responsibility. We weren't part of the past situation, and we're trying to do the right thing. We think that there's an opportunity here now with the current staffing situation, the maintenance team as it is, to look for an alternative path forward that may actually be a good thing for us from a financial standpoint and also from an aesthetic standpoint. And I think we need to give it a try. We had this situation with the street sweeper. We didn't know what to do. Do we insource it? Do we outsource it? We decided to outsource it. Whirlybird didn't work out that well, right? They didn't come when they were supposed to. They didn't come the second time when they were supposed to. So then we decided, well, maybe that's not the best way forward. Leroy came along, and we were able to solve an issue and put an asset that we have to work for the community. So I think the board is committed to try and find the right path forward. And I think we need to have a little bit of flexibility from the community, of which I'm a part myself, that we have the right intentions and we're trying to do the best thing. And I think if we all start from that viewpoint, then we can move forward. without always questioning, motives or things like that. So I think, give it an opportunity. I think Bruce is committed to try and get some bids. We're trying to do this in a fiscally, financially responsible way. And we're not going to go out and spend wildly. But we want to make sure that maintenance things are not deferred. There's a lot of deferred maintenance here. And we need to do it because we live in the community we live in because we want it to look nice and to be maintained. So that's all I really have to say. And I think we've really hashed this issue a lot. So maybe there are other issues that we need to discuss.
Okay, but can I just say one quick thing though, Jeff? I don't intend for any of the questions. I don't think Ted or anybody else speaking tonight intends to ask a question as an indication of a lack of respect for the intentions of the board. I think it's more that the members are looking for information before they vote on a budget after the last 2 years, that they are able to ask questions to identify what the risks are surrounding those numbers and the risks of the budget going into deficit. So it's more of a question about our concerns about our dues and the financial situation, and not because we doubt that the board intends to manage the funds correctly. It's not that's not the source of the questions. And that's not what I thought the town hall was for. I thought the town hall was for us to be able to ask those questions. So I would hope that nobody is thinking that we're asking questions because we think that you guys don't know what you're doing. We're asking questions because we'd like the information.
And April, thank you for your work on the finance committee. Appreciate it. Lori?
Okay, I'm going to ask a couple of questions. Mark German had asked if anybody had thought of hiring from or talk to the general manager of the Mount Baker ski area and the possibility of hiring from their semi and unskilled winter labor force for the SRA's summer needs.
That would be a question that Debbie would probably be able to answer. Debbie?
We appreciate Mark's suggestion, and that's something that we can look into, Doug.
Great.
Okay, and we're going to go to Peggy Richter.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple questions related to the Carnoustie bioswale. I guess I'm a little confused and also a little concerned that we do have something in our budget for it, and we're even having a conversation about it. I looked at the Carnoustie CC&Rs, and it couldn't be clearer that the bioswale obligation belongs only to Carnoustie HOA, not the SRA. I also was trying to find, and I didn't see where the board discussed and approved entering into any kind of agreement with whether it was the developer or the new buyer, or I'm not actually sure who's a party to that agreement. But my questions are, when did the board discuss the Carnoustie bioswale and approve entering into any kind of agreement with the parties? And why did they, when the liability for that bioswale belongs solely to the Carnoustie HOA?
I think to answer your question directly, Peggy, that the officers of the corporation are all asking ourselves the same question. How is it that we got to this point when there is no obligation for SRA to assume liability for the Carnoustie bioswale? Now, that agreement, there was no resolution that I am aware of, and we've done some checking, or a motion to ratify that document. We've talked to lawyers, 2 different lawyers, and we've gotten pretty much the same response in that it's a binding agreement. The challenge that we believe is that it was for a repair, not a complete replacement. So that's one challenge. The second challenge is how do we transfer this back to the declarant to take responsibility for it, because it's obviously the declarant's lack of long-term maintenance that has caused it, and the declarant's lack of forming an HOA that may be able to hold that declarant's feet to the fire to get things fixed. So it's not just a clear, and Peggy, being a land use attorney, I'm sure you understand, and I know that you've looked at the agreement, can understand where this becomes a bit of a challenge for us. Yeah, I've asked Dave Eulis to help us. He's offered to help us work forward with that. Jonathan Huguet, a professional engineer, has been very involved with our engineering team and the contractor and Bruce in order to bring clarity as to what, if any, the repair is. We don't think it's a repair. They can't point to a failure point. So we can't really just do a repair. And we don't believe that a total replacement is a repair. So there's challenges going on there. We've reached out to New Ventures, Jason Ragsdale, to open that discussion, and we'll see where it goes.
So there is a possibility that we could be liable for it, I guess is what you're saying. I
I don't think
hope
that there's, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I mean, we're showing it in our budget, and it sounds like we signed an agreement assuming some sort of liability for something. I'm not sure what. And I guess at one point, I know Alec was touting how much money the SRA got in exchange for that agreement. And I thought the thought was you're going to share it with the community, and I hope you do that, because if our money's at risk, I'd like to know what's in that agreement. But my other comment would be, I hope you're using a lawyer, somebody other than who drafted that agreement, because there may be some vested interest in that lawyer not giving us the right advice.
Yeah, I believe that the agreement was drawn by the Semiahmoo LLC lawyer. I don't think it was drafted by the SRA lawyer, but we have also gone to another lawyer that is familiar with SRA work, that has done previous work here. And we've had a meeting with him. We'll probably have additional follow-up with him.
I guess one last comment, I won't belabor it. You know, if we're not, I mean, you have zero liability for 2022 for it, but I'm wondering if there will be, if you need to reserve for some legal fees, if this is not going to be easily resolved.
That's a good point. I believe we do have legal fees in there. Probably not if we were having to go to court to defend it. I don't anticipate this would ever go to court, because my hunch is this will probably settle out in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Lori?
Okay, Pilar Whitmore, she asked to Joe in particular, how is the refinancing on our mortgage progressing?
The CIT Bank has the application. It generally takes, I think they said 4 to 6 weeks. And with hope, it'll be done sometime in the next couple or few weeks. That should provide us with, that should provide us with a discount to our current mortgage rate of close to 1% from the time it's approved, because it's based on the federal 10-year rate. which would currently give us a rate at about 4.05% versus the current 5% that we're paying. And it's for 15 years.
Lori?
Next up is Paul Atchison.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. There's not a whole lot left for me to say, but I do have a few questions in terms of if we do go to outside sources for our maintenance, et cetera. What happens when we go and have to turn around in the meantime with our assets, such as, are we going to be still holding inventory on our equipment? Are we still going to be using it was brought up earlier, the snow sweeping? We have a temporary solution for the street sweeping, and I'm glad to hear that we're going to keep that street sweeper. They are hard to get in good condition like the one we have. So that was one thing that I wanted to bring up. The other thing is that I got a call from Bellingham Palace this morning, and they also recommended that they tried outsourcing and it didn't seem to work that well for them over there. So the only other things out of being outsourcing and versus staying in-house is that I've been on the board and associated with the board for over 8 years. I actually started in an unofficial role, but it included maintenance during my entire 8 years. And it seems to be that maintenance is becoming very strategic, but in my opinion, it's a hands down, get it done type situation. We can plan the best we can. We perhaps have not been doing that in the recent times. When I look back on my tenure, we tried to make it a priority. I hope that becomes the case. And again, this is not rocket scientist, but it's rocket science, but it's also something that we need to get a hard hand on and act accordingly. And that's the end of my comments, and I thank everybody.
Thanks, Paul. I'll just kind of piggyback on what you said there. You know, we're fortunate that we don't have a lot of difficult assets to try and maintain, like the marina and the golf course and the hotel and stuff. We're pretty much just a straight over tackle kind of a maintenance mission here, and along with our SRA or ASC requirements, and just basically administering the neighborhood. This is basically a maintenance company, and that is not in the too hard to do category. We just need to make sure we've got the right team with the right directives to make sure that it happens, and that's what we're focused on.
One other quick follow-up to that, though, is that if McDonald's can't get people in to work for them and they're feeding them, we're up against a little bit of a harder climb than we used to have. So thank you again.
Thanks, Paul.
Mary Jo Biederbach is up next.
Hello, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay, thank you. Great seeing everyone. I know there's been a lot of discussion this evening on the bioswales, and I had notes from when everything was going down and the change of the board with Alec. And my notes reflect that he was going to release a report to the membership, meaning all of our homeowners here, and let us see what he had decided on for Carnoustie and the bioswale. I've never seen that report. I've never seen any mention of that report. And I'm thinking if we look back at that report, that might be where all these issues stem from. Perhaps he promised something that should not have been promised. And if we look back at those minutes from when all of this was happening, we might be able to find that missing link. Certainly, no one wants to be held, to be held responsible for those expenses. And it should be, just the Carnoustie HOA, as you have said, Doug, and I understand that. But I have probably 10 or 12 very good friends who live throughout Semiahmoo, and this is something that they're all very concerned with, because no one wants to be hit with some sort of fee, an association fee that we weren't looking forward to. or even budgeted for. And I know we don't want that as the SRA. So, you know, I'll put that aside because we've been talking about this all night, but I think that there's something, some sort of report out there that Alec was involved in, because that was obviously supposed to be released. He said it would be released and made public in his open line of communication, and we never saw it. So that's one comment. And then another comment that I've had from a lot of friends and a lot of new people that have just moved in here. If Debbie is leaving, and she has been with us for so long, and we're going to hire a new general manager. Tonight, we started off with Doug saying that we're going to get our community involved, and we have a lot of really knowledgeable and smart people within the community that are retired. And somehow we have to get them to help out. You know, I'm one of them. I could help out, but I've been very sick. So there's a lot of stuff going on. But the concern is, are we stretching ourselves too high to get a general manager and the cost for a general manager if we're going to use the community more, the community assets of the individuals living here? And I didn't see a budget for a new general manager anywhere here. I looked at the description of the position that's being advertised, and it's covering quite a few different things, but I don't see the general manager budgeted in for next year. And perhaps someone just needs to help me with that and show me where that is.
Joe, do you want to respond to that?
So Mary Jo, there is incorporated in the administration part of the budget, a replacement general manager for Debbie.
Okay.
I don't know. So it's under what I would just call salaries or personnel costs.
And Debbie was not considered a general manager. So the new general manager, in my understanding from the cost of everything going up 20–30%, we've accounted for that for the future forecast for 2022, obviously. But if we have a lot of help from people within the community, will those responsibilities be lessened? Or will the board then step back a little bit and let the new general manager handle things?
What we're hoping, this is Joe speaking again, what we're hoping is that the staff is going to own the responsibilities relating to the association, and that the board is going to be here for strategic guidance and potentially governance as well as oversight. Here's an example, Mary Jo. So I'm a CA and a CPA from Canada, and in the original budget for this year, or plan for this year, was $6,000 a month for 9 months for an accounting person. I said before I went on the board that that's ridiculous. And so in addition to being a board member, I am actually acting as the accountant for the association, doing basic general ledger work, review general ledger work, booking entries. I did the whole budget to myself, or by myself, in addition to people providing me feedback about what they needed in order to do maintenance or whatever. So I'm one of those people in the community who's helping out the association this year. And hopefully there will be other people who might be able to lend services for individual projects. It's a big undertaking for individuals to step up and do a bunch of work on a committee and or the board. As you guys all know, if you've been paying attention, and many of you have over the last 6 months to a year. What may be better for individuals is to help in one or two little things along the way, because experts in small little areas can certainly help us out.
Definitely. And I think what you are doing, Joe, is commendable, because I really feel that if more people knew that you are giving that of your time and your knowledge, and eliminating or lowering the cost of a CPA for the board, more people would come forth if they knew they had smaller jobs to do, and they could help out. And maybe just a little bleep about it, that you could write or something and let people know as we do go out to the community to ask for more help, I think would be a great example, to show that that is where some of our expenditures have come down because you have volunteered this.
And I'm just one example. I know on the maintenance side, a bunch of people on the maintenance committee, as well as on the finance committee, and likely other committees as well that I'm not as familiar with, are volunteering their time to do things like Ted said earlier, which is going around and looking at roads and looking at portions of the community that we would normally think is the responsibility of maintenance staff and not the board, but they're taking it on themselves to do it because we know that it needs to be done. And, and as you know, as you've mentioned, the more when individuals step up, it becomes conducive to more individuals stepping up and helping, even if it's just small projects at a time.
Right, because I think one of the biggest problem right now is people look at what's available and they see all the meetings that they have to go to, and they can't attend maybe all the meetings in a given month, but they could lend their hand on quite a few things leading up to that meeting. And I think if they saw, just some interest stories from people like yourself and April and everyone else who is doing this, and I don't know everybody's names, that would be great, because people ask me all the time, what can I do to get involved? I just can't go to the meetings.
Well, Mary Jo, this is Jeff. We always want volunteers. We've got several committees. There are more than ample opportunities. If you can't attend all the meetings, we certainly understand. I think the best course of action for anyone on the call is write to Lori and let Lori know that you're a resource with the skill set of X or Y, and you're interested in lending a hand, even though you may have time limitations. And we certainly would welcome that. It would funnel down to the right committee if it was around safety and security or around finance or whatever. We certainly encourage that.
Oh, definitely. Okay, well, that's good to know, because I think so many people are afraid to volunteer because of time restraints. And if they knew that they could do little snippets of things, I think we would have a much more cohesive community of volunteers to help the board and help ourselves. And that's really what we need.
Agree.
So that's it from me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Jo.
Thank you.
Okay, Helen Worley.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Doug, for chairing this. I have a couple of comments. And for those who talk about volunteering, I volunteered on various things over the years. Communications Committee, Elections Committee, of which I'm currently chair. By virtue of being on that, I was on the board until it was determined that the chair of elections should not be on the board, so I'm stepping back. But I know about volunteering. I want to make a couple of comments, Doug, and the members of the board now. First off, could we stop just trashing everything joint partners did? There was a lot of good that came out of the action of retaining joint partners. Joe talked about the new banking thing. That came up as a result of the work that they did, and Joe and his team implemented that. That was a major thing to save us and to organize our finances and to make it easier for the owners to be able to pay their dues, etc. That's only one. As a result of a lot of the investigation on things that came up, well, we discovered a lot of the things in maintenance that what numbers of people have talked about tonight. The posts did not deteriorate in 2 years. They deteriorated because they were not maintained for many years. And now there is a plan to replace those. The gates. The gates are very important for security and for appearance and safety. I recall a board meeting when Bruce said, well, he went around and looked at the gates and discovered that the safety things that mean when you come in the gate, and if the gate comes towards you and you're there in the car, it needs to go back. They weren't working. So a lot of things have been done because people investigated. And I want to commend the board and Joe and the people who put together the budget, and Bruce in maintenance and John Palin chairing that committee for the work on that and saying we can do it a different way. It's hard to change, but we are making the changes. Why do we have things about the Drayton Hillside Bioswale? Are all owners aware that we are by law required by the city of Blaine to have a geotechnical survey every year on that? Hasn't been done for a while, but it will be now. All of this type of thing. This is a complex organization. It is a little town. It is complex. It's not just pretty flower beds. It's bioswales. It is stormwaters, and there's Carnoustie. All of these things. I want to commend the board for grappling with them, presenting them to you now in 2 meetings. And yes, there's a fee increase, and I'm going to be glad to pay it. Our fees have been kept down for years, and we know the result. So this is not a series of questions. This is simply, let's look at the good that has been done. I know people weren't happy with the cost, but the good that has come out of this, and it is complex. And a shout out to the board who are working hard to move us to a new era. So thank you. That's my comment.
Thank you, Helen. I will just mention one thing that Helen kind of tricked, and that is a lot of the stuff that has been done, for example, the work on the gates and stuff you don't see. You know, a lot of the stuff that's been done is just stuff you don't really see. The sprinklers getting put back into play, little things like that. You just don't see it, but it's been done. So anyway, next, Lori.
Just quickly, Doug, and chartering committees and getting structure instead of ad hoc. That's really important. Another underground thing. Thanks.
Okay, Steve Haynes is up.
Steve, you may be muted.
Not anymore.
There we go.
I just wanted to, a statement was made that it's illegal for us to spend from the reserve account without a vote of the community. And the suggestion was made that we read the law. So I'd like to. This is the revised Code of Washington 64-38-075 entitled Reserve Account Withdrawals. I'm just going to read 2 sentences. First sentence says an association may withdraw funds from its reserve account, pay for unforeseen or unbudgeted costs that are unrelated to maintenance, repair, or replacement of the reserve components, period. There are some notification requirements and a plan to repay. And the last sentence is payment for major maintenance, repair, or replacement of the reserve components out of cycle with the reserve study projections or not included in the reserve study may be made from the reserve account without meeting the notification or repayment requirements under this section. So that's the law we're working under. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not giving legal advice, but it doesn't sound to me like it is prohibited that we spend from the reserve account without a vote of the association. I just don't think that that statement should go unquestioned.
Thank you, Steve. Lori?
Okay, I am going to, Don had asked, and I'm just not positive that he was satisfied with the answer in the chat. Don Delaney had asked for a clarification on everyone who is responsible for the Carnoustie bioswale costs. And per the Carnoustie CCNRs, it is Carnoustie NOHOA. Joe appeared to indicate some lawyers different, and please clarify. So I just wanted to make sure that Don is satisfied with the answer to that was put in the chat.
I'll respond because I've been involved in the discussions with the lawyers. The lawyers have said that the agreement is a binding agreement. However, there are certain elements there that bring question to the validity of the agreement. One is that there's not a scope of work. Maybe we could be talking about the possibility that there was a misunderstanding of the scope, and therefore the agreement could be broken potentially. We don't know for sure because it's really a negotiation that we can't really talk about much in depth. The bottom line, I think that Don is asking about is whether or not SRA has any fiscal obligation to carry the cost of that. And while there may be at some point a requirement for the SRA to fix it, those costs will be have to be borne. We don't really have a choice. Have to be borne by Carnoustie. SRA is not going to be allowed. I don't think anybody in the community would allow SRA to actually carry that that cost as an SRA cost. So although it may come out of our pocket, it will be billed back to the Carnoustie residents and landowners. I hope that that's clear. You know, it's about as clear as mud right now from where we are to how we get there and what we're going to have to go through. But we're working on it diligently. I think we have good technical folks working with us, and we will come to resolution on that fairly quickly here, because since about the 1st of August is when this thing really started to kind of when we actually got the bids that came in much higher than had been touted last spring. We decided that we needed to really look into this and figure out what exactly was going on. So hope that answers your question, Don.
Okay. Mark German has asked, what contingency factor has been used for any quotes that expire before actualizing the work in 2022?
I can
Joe,
attempt to answer this as the treasurer, although I don't think that this falls within me. We do not have any quotes yet for work to be done in 2022. We will be looking at getting them sometime soon when we believe that the work is going to be on the near horizon rather than the longer term horizon.
It's mostly seasonal too. So most of the work happens between March or April and October.
Next question, Lori.
Dave Whitmore is up next.
Mute. Okay. Yeah, just a couple things. Just to follow up a little bit with what Mary Jo was talking about having more people participate in board activities. I think it would be my recommendation that you guys create some ad hoc committees and put a quick charter together for an ad hoc committee and hopefully not spend 6 months on it. I'm talking about maybe a few days or a week to put something that might be a 3 to 6 month project and put it out there on the website and request some volunteers. And, that would define what kind of skills they need to do the project and that timeline for when it's complete and what the goal is. And, keep it simple and that would be my recommendation. And then you're not tying up somebody to be a member of a committee for 2 years or whatever the rule is for that. I think you might get some more volunteers. Somebody like me that's part-time here at Semiahmoo, and it's hard for me to commit for a 1 to 2 year commitment. The other thing was on the reserve budget. Just want to make a comment that there is per RCW a law that you're supposed to update your reserve budget every year, and it doesn't need to be a big deal. You did a full boat one last year, so a little, and you had $500 budgeted to have the thing updated this year. So, and then the in the finance committee charter, it says that your reserve budget is kind of driven from the reserve report, the reserve study, I should say. So anyway, that's just a comment. You guys probably ought to do that. And then there will be some backup for your thing, as well as looking at for people to vote on an increase in reserve allocations. And to make a good decision, you should have at least the reserve study is a 30-year outlook, but a 5-year outlook to see what happens to your reserve balance would be important for people to vote on a price increase or an assessment increase. The other thing on the budget, and again on making a decision in November, one thing I would like to see is, as Doug had mentioned, the major function of the SRA is to do maintenance. And I would like to see a budget that shows the breakout of the maintenance versus the admin costs. I did that when I had access to the budget, and it was broken out by that. And with the professional fees earlier in the year, you guys were running like, not you guys, but the prior board is running about 70% admin costs and 30% on maintenance. And if I were running a business, I would hate to think that my overhead was 70% and my function, of my business was only spending only 30% on what my business is supposed to be doing. So if you could break that out, I think it'd be a more sellable thing, especially if you want to increase the dues or assessments. If that money was going towards maintenance and not overhead, it would make sense to do that. So that's the only comments I have.
Dave, may I comment on your thought about, this is Joe, on the maintenance versus administration? So
Sure.
just to let you know, the way it's broken down this year, when I say this year, I mean 2021, about 55% of the budget, of the total budget, is based on administration costs, which includes the ASC and other types of things that are admin oriented. And 39% of the budget is for maintenance, with the other 5% approximately being interest and other things related directly to the building. That's just factual information for 2021. Next year, based on our forecasts, we're looking at 49% and 45% between admin and maintenance. So we are narrowing the gap. It is a gap this year. I don't have the information handy for last year, but it's not 70-30 as you said. It's 55-39.
I was looking at the 6 months, the time that our consulting guys were here. That's what,
the consultants in 2021 and 2020 absolutely were a big cost to the administration side, and we understand that we're getting, as we mentioned earlier, we're getting back to we need to be a maintenance oriented community, and not at least at this moment in time for the next year or couple of years, and not focused on administrative types of tasks.
No, I just think that'd be good. If you're gonna do a price increase or assessment increase, Joe, I think that's a good selling point to show where we're improving and our percentage of increasing our percentage of maintenance based on the past history. That's all.
That's what we're trying to do.
Okay,
you know,
great.
from all of us being on the board, we know that that's what the community wants. We heard what happened late last year at the AGM and through the next 6 months. And now we're trying to put that into play. That has been our forecast since many of us have been on the board since basically March.
Well, and this is Jeff, Dave. I mean, let's not forget, we live in the community too. So first and foremost, I'm a community, I'm a homeowner. So I don't want to live in a place that's not maintained. So, that's certainly a motivation. As a board member, I want to try and do what I can to help make things happen. To your point about the staff, the overhead costs, that's precisely why we're actually trying to look at the right sizing, as I call it, the team, the human resource team that we have in the SRA. Is it the right size to do the work? Is there a more efficient way to manage it cost effectively than having additional people in the SRA? And so I think this is what we're trying to look at. And it's a process. We don't get there right away. We don't get there tomorrow. But I think that's where we're headed. I'm
just saying that the results of your efforts should be reflected in the budget. That's all. And it sounds like it is. So that's good.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay.
Okay, so this question came in earlier and I believe it was already addressed, but I'm just in case the person missed the answer. Andrew Fisher has asked, why isn't Drayton Hillside Homeowners Association responsible for their own bioswale, as they are the ones who benefit from having it, unlike concerns that affect the whole of Semiahmoo Residents Association?
Well, Steve, if you would like to respond to that, go ahead.
Sure. First of all, it's in the plat and in the CCRs that the SRA is responsible for. And second, a lot of the drainage from other neighborhoods comes down to those bioswales, which is why it was put in the plat and the CCRs.
Thanks, Steve. Laurie?
Okay, the next question I got is anonymous. Why don't we develop a planned maintenance system that covers all of Semiahmoo maintenance requirements and work inspection periodicity? Then all maintenance is fully understood.
Let me just respond to that in that I believe that in 2022, you will see a very strong maintenance plan articulated and published.
Okay, I don't have anybody else that has indicated that they wish to speak in open forum.
Lori, Brian Johnson here.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, can I get a couple of minutes?
Absolutely.
Am I out of order, board?
Speak up, Brian.
Very, very quickly, and these are just three observations, three thoughts that don't need any necessary response at all from the board, because it is getting late and you guys are putting in lots of great extra hours for us. But number one was that I represent 6 years as a member of the ASC and 6 years as a member of the SRA board. And so I've seen a lot of different people come through these organizations. And from the year 2000, when I first joined the ASC for my first term until now, I can't think of one person who was anything but totally committed to the betterment of the Semiahmoo community. We all had our oh my gosh, the sky is falling issues that we dealt with over the years, and you certainly have viewers now, and they're difficult, they're contentious, but I just think that anybody out there, and I'm speaking to the general community, who thinks that people get on this to get on these organizations to burnish their record or to have more sway in the community, it's not so. These are good-spirited, hardworking folk who really are committed to the betterment of Semiahmoo. A second thought, however, that I do have is that it's a minor point, but I think is a major point as well. We've had several anonymous comments submitted tonight, and as a person who's led not-for-profit boards for a long time, I just made it a policy never to honor a comment or a question that somebody was not willing to put their name to. I think that's a very important, just general axiom to follow. If you don't believe in it enough to put your name to it, don't bother to submit it, or we're not going to consider it. The third thing that I have is my own personal SRA hobby horse to save money, to help you control unnecessary expenses, to help you control equipment and maintenance costs there and personnel costs. And that is the whole issue of street sweeping. We don't need our streets swept. It's a luxury that we can certainly live without. When we first moved here, nobody had ever heard of a street sweeper or the necessity to have your streets swept. And somehow it just seems to have evolved into a recurring every year expectation that people have. And when you ask them why, they really can't quite give you an answer, but it's great to have your streets swept. And I would suggest that that whole program be done away with. 5 or 10 minutes once a week with a broom out around the front of your property, and maybe unclogging the occasional clogged drain is all that it would take. And that could be somebody's commitment to the community right there, and save tons on the budget, save tons on the dues, that not tons, but money on the dues that we're all going to get charged for that privilege. I am dumbfounded that the dirt has to get moved around the streets occasionally, and we call that street sweeping. Thanks very much for your time. As I say, no comments necessary.
Thank you, Brian. And I just want to say thanks to everybody for your comments tonight. Yeah.
We actually have 3 more now that have asked to speak.
Well,
sorry.
it's 8 o'clock, and you know, everybody's been here for a couple hours, and I would encourage those folks to put those questions or comments into an email and have them send them to you, Laurie, and we will respond and we will hear. But I think it's time for everybody to get off the screen and go have dinner and have a good evening. And thanks everybody for your participation. I want to give a special thanks to our staff and to our maintenance committee, our finance committee, our communications committee, and all of our directors that have been working tirelessly to make these town halls a success. And I got to tell you, it's been a lot of work for a lot of folks, but I think it's worthwhile. And we want to make sure that we are doing the community's work the way the community wants to see it. So thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
What a joke.